Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AA Podcast. This is Ashley Olson.
And I'm Andrea Crane.
We are continuing our series on cognitive health this week. But before we get into all of that, we are going to share our weekly Bible verse. And mine is coming from Philippians 2:2, which says, "Make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose."
Excellent. And mine is from Romans 8:6. For the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the spirit is life and peace.
Love him. So, Andrea, last time we started getting into some specific types of cognitive health diseases, such as
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's, which is a popular one. Parkinson's is another one. Well, Parkinson's dementia is
Mm-hmm.
another one. Vascular dementia and Lewy body dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of went over some stats too that were pretty staggering. And so the stats that were showing, which you said were kind of difficult to kind of get a good gauge on what's current because a lot of these numbers are like
Mm-hmm.
5, 10 years old, is what you.
Yeah, the the epidemiologists aren't necessarily up on the most current data because things move quickly,
Yes.
and in order for them, these studies are big and unwieldy, and you got to sift through all the data. So there's great information that comes from these giant retrospective studies. However, pawing through all of that data is very costly and very time consuming. So
Mm,
often these statistics are like 10 if not more years behind. So yeah, when we're talking about like I believe we mentioned up to 10% of all of those over 65 will develop dementia. That is a 10 to 15-year-old statistic, and so it's only getting worse.
hmm
So we're probably beyond that now.
Yeah. We also started talking about things that are linked to dementia, which is things like untreated hearing loss, which is
Mhm.
a kind
Yeah.
of a surprising one, but makes sense. Another one that makes sense is sleep.
Mhm.
Actually, all of these make sense.
Yeah.
Maintaining
Yeah.
healthy weight,
Mhm.
moving your body at least 150 minutes a week.
Mhm.
Uh, Alcohol use. Those are just some of the things that we
Yeah.
started talking about, and I think we're going to continue with more in
Mhm.
depth on the alcohol use too. I mean, if you're privy to any of the accounts on um, health and wellness on the grams or social media, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think alcohol has become a hot topic in the last year or so because
Yeah.
it used to be like, oh, drink a glass of wine a day and this is really great for your health. But what
Mhm.
we're showing is that any amount of alcohol actually has detrimental effects on the body.
Yep.
um, and really honestly it just has no benefit of the body.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so, um,
Yeah, and you can
Huberman is a big one on that one.
Oh, yeah, and you can so there are ways that you can take studies, and you really have to torture the data in order to come up with some kind of benefit derived from potentially the polyphenols in alcohol or red wine or whatever.
Hmm
But you've really got to manipulate and massage the data to such an extent that that it really comes down to, okay, if you're having to work that hard to find a benefit, then is this something you really need in your life? So yeah, and that's what I tell people every day all day, is that I have a drink periodically, but the thing is, I just want you to do it with informed consent, right?
hmm
Everything with informed consent. Just know what you're putting in there and know what it's doing, and then make the choice for yourself, because
Absolutely.
you got to walk around in that body, not anybody else. So you make
That's
the
true.
choice. Yeah.
That is so true. Um, Well, why don't we continue on this list
Okay.
of
Yeah, and I
things that are linked to dementia?
okay, and yeah, and I just wanted to dive in just a little deeper on the alcohol use because we let's see, I think what I mentioned last time is that alcohol use correlates to the increasing prevalence of dementia. However, I wanted to go a little bit more in depth and oh, Ashley, can I just share with the listeners why my exuberance may be a little tempered today? May I
Yes.
share? May I
I
share? May I
I
have a moment
forgot
of
to ask
silence
you.
and
Yes.
sharing? You did forget to ask me, and I take that
I'm
personally.
sorry.
Um, yeah. My grief, my grief is not shared by my partner. However, I am in the throes of some botanical bereavement at the moment because I lost 30 to 40 jugs of plant babies over the last frost period. So, for those of you who would like to check on me, I'm doing okay. But only just. Um so I'm still trying to come to terms with what has happened, the massacre on
Yeah.
my lawn. But
She
yeah,
might
we
be
had
investing in some grow lights.
yes, no, I will not be bringing them inside. They need to be wild. They need to be out in the yard, and plus my husband won't let me bring them inside. So it's bad enough I keep taking chunks of his yard away. I'm like conscripting it for garden space, but um yeah, there were 2 frost nights, you guys, and so if we're recording this in April and it's gonna drop in April too, so if you're keeping up with the podcast, then you'll know exactly what season we're in. It's that dreaded shoulder season where you can have some
Spring
freezing
is
nights.
moody is what we call it.
Yes, yes. So I got fooled by false spring and I didn't pay close enough attention. So we had 2 nights that were below freezing. On the coldest of the 2, I knew about it. And so I went out and on all of my plants in the jugs that had green foliage, right? Like they're above ground, they have foliage on them, you need to cover. The seeds, as long as they haven't sprouted, they're totally fine. They don't care what the temperature is. But if they have sprouted, they must be covered.
Which I didn't
So
know because I brought my plants in, which have not sprouted, but I will
uh
quickly take them out back
yes,
outside
yeah.
after this
They
episode is recorded.
they have to go back outside. So yeah, the plant babies, they survived the first one, which was the hard freeze. It got down to like 27, 26. And they sailed through that. And so I thought I was out of the woods. I brought the blankets inside. I had to work the next day, so it wasn't, I was prepping charts the night before and I didn't check the news, I didn't check the weather. And so that night when I got home from work on Friday, I went out and checked everybody and it was just like I was hearing that dramatic like movie music, battlefield music in my head where it's just like casualties everywhere. It was terrible. Oh gosh, so much work, like black leaves just shriveled up. So I have a lot of replanting to do. I will rebuild, folks. I will rebuild. Um,
She
but
she will build back better.
I, but really. So also, but here is where I'm really plumbing the depths of my grief, and that is for my apricots because
Oh yeah.
the apricots, like my whole season is lost. My whole
Mm.
season. You heard that right. They look like actually okay, so I didn't know this, but apparently killed apricots look like little shriveled up testicles. And so it looks like I have 2 shriveled up testicle trees out there and yeah, all you nurses, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, so yeah, it's a sad day here at the
I'm
Crane Farm.
sorry. That's a lot of
Yeah.
work and that's a lot
Thank
of
you.
yeah.
Thank you for finally acknowledging my my hardship, Ashley. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Okay.
I See, I have no hope for mine because this is my first year. So, like, my expectations are very low. Like, if I get a
Oh
green
my gosh.
thing that pops up, I will be so excited. But my
Oh.
full expectation is that I will be buying plants.
I
So,
I don't I don't think I have
so
authorization to buy all the plants
yeah,
that
you,
I would need to fill all these boxes. So, yeah, anyway, it's just a big thing. So, if you got plants out there, protect them, folks.
yep.
Protect
Check your
them.
weather, set your phone to
Yes.
alert you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your plant babies are? That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Just yeah. All right. So back to alcohol. I'm thank you for letting me unburden.
Uh,
Thank you. So
yes, you're welcome.
so here's
Sorry, I forgot to ask.
well, it's all right. It's all
Yeah,
right. I mean,
kind
you're
of,
not
not really.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'll get over it. Okay, so I wanted to talk about alcohol use. Now, here's the part that I don't think is fully well explained. So, we know and people probably are aware of this, but alcohol causes gastritis. And everybody knows that an itis is an inflammation, right? So, alcohol is an irritant. It's a poison, but it's also an irritant. And so it irritates the lining of the gut and causes gastritis. Now that impairs the barrier function of the gut. All right. So that means, and I've talked about barrier function before. Well, aren't those cute? Oh, Ashley
They're
just
my
put on
blue
some cute.
light glasses.
Oh, nice. Find me some that look like that
I
are
sent you some.
readers. Oh, okay. I'll take a look.
Yep.
So it when alcohol goes into the gut, it impairs that barrier. And so if you've heard of leaky gut, that's
Mm.
exactly what this does. And I always talk about leaky gut in terms of gluten when I'm trying to explain to patients or to anybody who really wants to listen that gluten causes an upregulation of a protein that wrenches the gut barrier apart. All right. And so it leaves you vulnerable to other proteins being able to come through. So, anyway, it's not a good state. Now, the thing to remember, and what I find so cool, is I found a paper on the blood brain barrier and
Mm.
how there is an analog of zonulin. So that protein that upregulates in the gut is called zonulin. And there is an analog, there's a neuro analog of zonulin, people. This is so interesting. So
Well, can
there,
you please explain what
oh,
zonulin is?
okay, so zonulin is the protein that responds to the presence of gluten, and it is created by these enterocytes. These are the cells that line your gut, right? They keep the inside in, they keep the outside out, all right? Unless it's ready for absorption. Okay, so whole proteins cannot get across. We don't want whole proteins going across. That's what inflames the immune system. Okay, that's what triggers autoimmunity, blah, 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 and on and on and on. So, we want to keep our gut barrier in check. Now there are times so you might say, okay, well that's weird. Why were we even created with a protein that could cause leaky gut or that could compromise our barrier function? Well, funny you asked. Okay? So it's it's because there are times where you want a leaky gut. You want that increased permeability, for instance, and primarily because in case we're dealing with like a gut infection. All right. So, gram negative bacteria on the surface, those are the kind, they're pathologic largely. Largely, we're dealing with a certain type of bacteria that are gram negatives, and they contain something called lipopolysaccharides on the surface of their cells. Now, this is LPS. So the body responds to LPS just like it responds to alcohol, just like it responds to gluten. And that is by increasing permeability. So it causes leaky gut. Now, the reason that this is good if you have a bacterial infection is it allows immune cells to migrate into the gut and fight.
Mm.
Okay, so we need that. We also need for that bacteria to be exposed to the lymphatic tissue. So this is the mucosal associated lymphatic tissue, the gut associated lymphatic tissue, also called malt and galt. So we need that bacteria to to be able to have access to our standing armies of white blood cells, right? So that they can say, oh, this is what our enemy looks like. Now we've got to create weapons to go and fight them. Okay. So that's how it gets rid of infection. However, with something like alcohol, it just willy nilly increases intestinal permeability in a time where it's not appropriate. And gluten does the
Mm.
same thing. Now, the reason why this is important for the brain is because the brain also, yes, the brain also has zonulin, or a zonulin analog that is upregulated by inflammation, lipopolysaccharide, gluten, and yes, alcohol. So when you have a leaky gut, guess what? You have a leaky brain. And so, right, which sounds which is not an attractive sounding brain. But it's inflamed. It's a measure of inflammation. And so a leaky gut and a leaky brain is all about these pro-oxidative inflammatory states.
I think
Okay.
this could be a really good episode to do on its own, talking about leaky gut, because I think a
Oh,
lot of
sure.
people are
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed with leaky gut, um,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily leaky gut. I
Right.
think we
And you
kind
know
of
what?
touched on it in our
Yeah.
autoimmune
Autoimmune.
series, but
Yeah.
something that maybe goes a little bit deeper.
Hey, you know what? If you've still got the spreadsheet open, let's talk about that. And sorry, those of you who are listening, you're privy to our meetings. We just have them right here online. So let's talk about that in terms of food sensitivity testing, because a lot of people have
Yes.
ideas about food sensitivity testing and what it will or won't tell you that
Yes.
are not necessarily correct. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a great thing to talk about. All right,
You're
so
welcome.
thank you, Ashley. Um, so that is kind of where alcohol comes in to the dementia equation, right? If we've got this leaky brain, we've got this inflamed brain, that leads to damage. Okay. So now, and we're going to talk about inflammation and the process by which inflammation causes damage at the end of this list. Okay.
Okay.
So the next thing we'll talk about is blood glucose control. And oh
Mm.
my goodness, I am constantly running A1Cs on patients because blood sugar control, and I think this is the sad part about our current state of health in America, is that we've just kind of gotten used to having high blood pressure, right?
Mm.
We've kind of gotten used to having high blood sugar. You'll hear things like, well, it's not that high. Well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it does this periodically, or it'll go down when I'll start making changes tomorrow or next week or next month. Um, but really, we need to be going after this stuff like our hair is on fire,
Mm.
because it can lead to dementia. So hear what I'm saying. The type 2 diabetes, which is a scourge, it's everywhere. Type 2 diabetes is, in and of itself, it's an inflammatory state, right?
Yep.
There are heightened inflammatory markers just in terms of type 2 diabetes. Now, Raven has just made an appearance. I thought she was sleeping. I thought she was worn out sufficiently. She's our
She
mascot.
got our 30-minute nap and now we're ready to
Right.
go again.
We
uh,
all should have a little Raven.
yes.
Okay, so,
But
but
no, like well, we've gotten used to one. We've
right.
gotten used to being heavier
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a society, especially in America. Um, and we've also gotten used to like this idea of um, high blood pressure. But
Yeah.
it's so common to hear people having type 2 diabetes now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's just like it's becoming more of a norm, but it's not.
Mhm.
It's becoming more common, but it should not become normal.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. And just because it is common, and folks, I'm not preaching. I have weight to lose. Like I'm not saying anything from on high here. I struggle with this. You guys know I'm in the throes of perimenopause and things have not been kind. So yeah, it's hard. I struggle every single day. I'm right there with you. but yeah, we should never come to this place where we're um uh, not that we don't like ourselves. I want to make that clear. You should like yourself, love yourself regardless of what you look like, regardless of where you are in attaining your goal, but have those goals for health. That's all we're saying here. And so what I wanted to say about glucose control. So when I mentioned blood sugar, a lot of people only think about type 2 diabetes, but really, when I say high blood sugar, the research is showing that not only type 2 diabetes, but also those who have elevated blood glucose levels, but not at the range where you are considered a type 2 diabetic, even before you get there, it increases your risk of dementia. So even if your doctor says, well, your A1C is elevated and your fasting blood glucose is elevated, but you're not at the risk of type 2 diabetes. Well, okay, that's fantastic. You're not at type 2 diabetes. However, your risk, just because of the elevation, your risk has put you at an increased risk of dementia.
That's
Okay.
crazy, which is
Yeah.
not talked about.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not even brought up. It's not even brought up. And so I also wanted to, and this is kind of a controversial subject, but I also wanted to say, and this is not up for dispute. This is in the literature. It is a fact. Statin use increases blood sugar levels.
Yep.
So if you are on a statin, you have increased blood glucose levels. You also have increased your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Now, this is not a medical advice show, so I am not going to tell you one way or the other what you should or should not be on. If you and your physician have determined that you need to be on a statin, be on your statin. But you better make
Informed
sure.
consent.
Yeah, that's right. And you better make sure that you are looking after your blood glucose levels,
Yep.
and
And
doubly
that goes
so.
back to like, okay, what quote unquote holistically can you do to help with that? You can move
Right.
your body more. You can eat
Mm-hmm.
better. There's
Yeah,
lots of things that you can do.
right. Exactly. So the next thing,
Berberine is help,
oh,
right? Berberine
yes.
helps with
Yeah,
blood
that's
pressure, right?
gosh, berberine is such a multi-pronged herb. In fact, I think that is in our what, episode 4 now? Our
Oh,
supplements that we're
our
looking at.
supplement.
Yes. Yeah, we're gonna, you guys, we're gonna talk about, this is kind of turned into a monstrous series. We were only gonna do like 1 or 2 episodes, but there's so much to brain health and cognition health that
Well, I mean,
yeah.
there's just so much that goes along with just
Mm-hmm.
brain health. Like, not only,
Right.
like, just like what you just talked about, like, if your gut is messed up,
Yeah.
your brain
y- Yeah. Yeah,
has
absolutely.
is not
Absolutely.
necessarily, I mean, messed
Well,
up is maybe a,
yeah, but if you have
but
increased
there's the,
permeability,
yeah,
then your brain is also permeable.
yeah. So it's all one and the same, and there's so much that goes along with it, and it's not isolated.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
just so kind of going back to like the glucose, you have type 2. Are you clipping your nails?
Oh, I just did. I'm sorry. Did you hear that? That's
Yes.
crazy. I have a snagger and it like ripped. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to put
Oh
that
my
away.
gosh.
I'm putting that
Did you
away.
have your mushrooms this
Whew.
morning?
I did. I did. I did. I'm a little extra today. I'm a little extra. Um
Okay. So going back to the glucose control is like,
mhm.
just because, oh, I just have my insulin's high. So like, or
Or
your
blood sugar.
sorry, blood
Yeah.
sugar is high, sorry. And so it's fine. Like you just kind of
Mhm.
put it in its own column, but
Mhm.
really you need to look at, okay, well, your blood sugar is high. What else is being affected?
Exactly. Exactly. And
So,
yeah, and it all kind of comes down to inflammation, as we'll see.
yeah.
So, we've talked about alcohol use, that is inflammatory. We talked about high blood glucose, that is inflammatory. Next, we're going to talk about stress moderation, and that is inflammatory. So,
Yep.
stress, increased levels. So, and please, please understand we are going to talk about solutions right now. I know we're kind of doom and gloom, but we're going to talk about solutions in the upcoming episodes. So
Yes.
we just want to make people aware of what things are causing problems at this
Yep.
point.
Mhm.
So stress moderation, it has been shown that increased levels of glucocorticoids inhibit memory retrieval and other cognitive functions. So when I say glucocorticoids, I'm talking about cortisol. So when you're stressed, when you're in this chronic stress state, as so many of us are for years, sometimes decades at a time, and your levels of cortisol go up and go up and go up. And I feel like this is kind of I feel like this is on people's radar, right? Like I have a fair number of patients that will come in and they'll ask like, hey, could you tell me what's going on with my cortisol? Which is kind of a loaded question, and we have a pretty robust discussion over that, but they are educating themselves about the impacts of stress and what that's doing in the body. I want people to go one more step, right? Like it's not enough just to know that your cortisol is high and that it is causing belly fat to deposit in your central region. I want people to know, okay, what else is going on here? So it directly inhibits brain function. So when you talk about memory retrieval, this is how quickly can you get to memories if you can get to them at all. This
Mm.
is information that you used to have at your fingertips, and now you're unable to retrieve it. And also overall cognitive dysfunction also declines when you are in a state of consistent exposure to cortisol.
The
Yeah.
probably might be a rabbit hole, but like I've always joked that I have the worst memory for like specifics sometimes. I have like
Mm-hmm.
memories of like certain things. I can remember certain things like it happened yesterday,
Mm.
but then there's like things like in my childhood or like things that like I don't remember years very well. Is that something that
Mm-hmm.
I should be concerned about?
Should we do
Like
a little
I
like
have a friend that like literally I can talk about something and she's like, "Oh, that happened in 2013." And I'm like, "How did you know that?"
no.
Like
Okay. Okay. So yeah, outside of doing a little mental status exam on Ashley in the middle, I think you're fine. No, people's people's brains are wired differently, right? Like I can't so I can kind of
she
see it
can't
on a
remember where she parked her car.
I can't. No, I can't. I can't. There's lots of really silly things that I cannot remember that end up being really important in my life, like where my car is. So, but I can remember stupid things like Avogadro's number from high school chemistry is
Oh my
6.022
gosh.
times 10 to the 23rd. Like where is
What?
that?
Why do
Can't why can't my car take over that space?
Okay.
But it doesn't. It's so stupid. But yeah, no, I think, and then okay, so
Uh-huh.
Heather can remember Heather and I lived together. Oh my gosh, it seemed like we lived together for a million years, but when I look back, it was only a few years. But we've known each other for 30 years. So anyway, Heather and she remembers every single address we ever had, and we moved a ton because we were very poor and often they would raise the rent and we would have to move. So this was way back in our like late teens, early 20s. And yeah, Heather has a crazy memory for 80s hair band song lyrics and also old addresses and phone numbers. So
Yes.
some people just have wiring like that.
Okay.
Heather, if you're listening, I love you. Um, but yeah, and yeah, so there's really no rhyme or reason for that kind of wiring, but when you are trying to retrieve the memories that you do have, then that's where exposure to corticosteroids really comes in.
Okay.
Now, interestingly, I just wanted to throw this out there. So, the process of moving memories from from an unstable to a stable state is affected by other things, but doesn't seem to be affected by cortisol, which is neither here nor there. But I just thought it was an interesting fact,
Huh.
just about neuroscience. So yeah. So the next thing.
Big one.
Diet.
I mean, it's kind of what we're all
Mhm.
about.
That's right. Food, food, food. Yes, diet, inflammatory foods. Oh my gosh. So it's uh, my husband, he is the king of quips, and he has so much wisdom in the little things that he says. But one of the things that he says is, well, that's simple, but it's not easy.
Oh,
And
yes.
so that is precisely what is
Hmm.
going on with diet, right? And
Yeah.
inflammatory foods. So I've basically broken this into three categories of foods, which, if we could get control over these three categories, we could reduce most of the inflammatory burden in the human body.
Mm.
And that is omega-6 fats, sugar, and processed foods. If we could get a
Which
handle
is
on those three,
basically
I know,
the
I
definition of the
everything.
American diet.
Right. There's a reason why the standard American diet is called sad.
Uh-huh.
Because it's real sad. So, yeah, omega-6 fats are those found in vegetable oils. They are found in conventionally or CAFO raised agriculture. So we're talking like feedlot cattle.
Oh,
This is the, and I've said this before on the show, but it is probably good to re-mention. If you're going to be buying grocery store meat, because it's absolutely, oh, it's so difficult to afford buying grass-fed, pastured meat, especially if you're feeding kids, especially if you're trying to feed a household on one and even two incomes now. It's so expensive. So, yeah, I mean, the reality of it is, people, I can't afford to feed my family only grass-fed meat. I
hmm,
try to whenever I can. But if you're going to eat grocery store meat, then get the leanest cuts that you can. Take the fat and throw it away. That is high in omega 6s. Now, if they are
okay.
fed a species appropriate diet, that is high in omega 3s. You want to eat that fat. So, for instance, I'm going to be putting on my Instagram some a couple of reels about making bone broth. I just made bone broth a couple days ago with these beautiful, beautiful lamb bones that I got from a local lamb raiser, and oh gosh, these things are incredible. They make this beautiful gelatinous broth. Um, and the fat on there, now I'm not going to use this particular fat because it has been cooking for longer than 24 hours, and that causes some oxidation even in animal fat. So that
Interesting.
can make it inflammatory. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. But when I'm eating meat from her beautifully raised animals, you better believe I'm eating all the fat, because that is high in omega 3s.
Are lamb, this is off topic, but are lambs tend to be fattier or leaner?
Well, I think it probably depends on the cut.
And
I
probably
have,
how they're fed.
yeah, so this is my, I could be wrong on this. I'm not an expert in the feeding of animals, but I had heard and had read somewhere that lambs will only eat grass. I don't know if that's true. So I used to, anyway, it was told to me that if you're buying lamb, it is necessarily grass fed because lambs only eat grass. So
Interesting.
I don't know if that's true. I'm gonna have to ask my lamb lady. She's brilliant. She's a brilliant woman. She's been doing this for a long time, and she sells lamb here in the Treasure Valley. So I'm gonna shoot her a question and see
Yeah. Could be
if
fun to
that's
have her
true.
on the podcast too.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, she's super interesting. So yeah, shout out to my landlady. I will I'll put a link up to her stuff if you're here in the Treasure Valley. She's incredible. Um, but yeah, we I will look into that. But yeah, this lamb is just incredible, and the bone broth is an anti-inflammatory food. So I will be it's, yeah, it's Meadowlark Farm. We can look that up. So now let's see. Sugar, we all know about sugar, right? Sugar
Yeah.
suppresses the immune system,
Hmm.
and cortisol suppresses the immune system. So you get a double whammy immune suppression with
Now let's talk
sugar.
about sugar because obviously berries and
Oh,
fruits
yeah,
and
yeah,
things
yeah.
like that.
Fructose.
So what
Yeah,
kind of sugars are we talking about?
I'm talking about added sugars. So sugars that are added to foods. And honestly, like I feel like people have a good handle on this, because nobody is riddled with disease because they ate too many apples. right?
Yeah.
Like oh, sorry, Mr. Sir, you ate too many blueberries and
Yep.
now you are riddled with disease. That
Mhm.
doesn't happen. So I think people know that it's the sugar added to things. Like, for okay, gosh, can we take yogurt? Can we just take yogurt for a minute? American yogurt, do you know what they're feeding us? You should look at the amount of sugar that is in American formulations of yogurt versus European formulations.
Mm.
So yogurt is supposed to be tangy. It's supposed to be tart, but our taste buds have been so perverted that like we don't tolerate bitter and we don't tolerate tart. We want yogurt, or we've been fed yogurt. I think there's a lot of blame to go around here. But the yogurts have become like dessert. There's so much added
Mhm.
sugars in them. So yeah, get plain yogurt, add your own fruit.
Yep.
Grow some raspberries. If you've got any ground at all, you can grow some raspberries. You can have a little peach tree. Grow what you can and then harvest it, put it in your freezer, and then put that on yogurt. Eat seasonally, right?
Mhm.
Get the sweet stuff when it's in season, and by sweet stuff I'm talking berries and fruit. Get it with it when it's in season and then put it in your freezer. And then processed foods, I mean, gosh, if we're opening packages and bags and boxes, you want to eat the majority of your food. You want to have it be with no label, right? So you don't want there to be a nutrition label on most of your food, because if there's a nutrition label, chances are it's not a whole food, it's a processed food. Now, I'm
Mhm.
all about reading labels. There's plenty of stuff that I eat in a day that has a label on it. I just ate a piece of gluten-free bread today, and you better believe there's a label on that thing. So, I open bags, I
Yeah.
open boxes. But we really need to cut down on the amount. All right,
So
next.
next one, so we kind of touched on it a little bit, but
Hmm.
microbiome.
The microbiome. This is a favorite topic of mine. I've been talking about the microbiome, like yelling about the microbiome for like, gosh, 12 years now. 12 years now. Um,
Isn't it said like the microbiome is kind of it's like a second brain
Yes,
or
it
the
is the
gut,
second
I
brain.
guess. Yeah.
Yes, the gut brain axis. In fact, there is so much neural tissue outside of the brain in that gut. In signals going from the gut to the brain outnumber 4 to 1 the signals coming from the brain to the gut. So you've got 4 signals heading up versus 1 signal going down, which is crazy. Yes. And those signals are influenced by the bacteria that live in your gut. Now, when I first started learning about and talking about the microbiome, this area of research was in its infancy. And we used to talk about the importance of diversity, right?
Mm.
That was the big word. We used to talk about the importance of microbial diversity. You wanted 1,000 different species or strains of bacteria in your gut. However, what we know now with more study, with more research, is that the picture is a little more complex than that. It's not just about diversity, although diversity is certainly um, linked overall to better pictures of health, better outcomes, less disease, etc. But the picture is very complex. So, in a nutshell, we want to make sure that commensals, these are the bacteria that are good for us. They do good things for us. These are the bacteria that produce the short chain fatty acids. There are 3 short chain fatty acids: butyrate, propionate, acetate. They help the brain. They send signals to the brain. These short chain fatty acids affect lots and lots of things in the body, and so commensals are the bacteria that are helping to produce these short chain fatty acids, among other things. And so what we want is for them to out influence the pathogenic or pathologic or disease causing bacteria. So essentially, and again, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but let's just say that we take the two types of bacteria and one's on one side of the paper and one's on the other. We got commensals on one side, and then we got these pathogenic bacteria on the other. Again, oversimplification, because the pathologic bacteria, they can do some good things for us. However, by and large, if they exert too much of an effect, they become inflammatory. All right. So there's that concept of inflammation again. It all comes down to inflammation. Now, we've also got, do you remember when I was talking about LPS or lipopolysaccharide, right? So when we have these gram negative non-commensal bacteria, pathogenic inflammatory bacteria, often these are gram negatives. They have LPS on the surface of their cells, and if you have large populations of these that are out influencing the good guys, that is associated with dementia and cognitive decline. So it's in your gut. These are literally bacteria in your gut that are conferring risks for dementia and cognitive decline.
Crazy.
Crazy. So, okay, next, periodontal disease. Now, why do you think that is sitting under the microbiome? Well, go back and listen to our oral health episodes, please. Plug, plug, plug. And then, so you have a whole entire microbiome that is in your mouth. And you want to make sure that your oral microbiome is healthy. And if you want to know how to do that, go back and listen. Um, so there are certain strains of bacteria that if they exist in your mouth, related to dementia. So
That's
important.
crazy.
Okay. Also, oh yeah, what did you want to say?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Just nothing. All right. Forget it.
Mm.
Okay.
No,
So
I mean it's kind of like the gut. Like our mouths
yeah.
are like there's so much in there that has
Yes.
it's not so isolated. Again, like
Right.
the body is so complex and literally talks to every part of our body. Like
Yes.
it's just so crazy when you just start learning and you start
Mm-hmm.
understanding like things are just not isolated and
Right.
things should not be ignored.
Yes, and you know what? I mean, this is why I love functional medicine. It I spent a long time both learning and teaching anatomy and physiology. Like all the years I spent teaching anatomy, teaching physiology, learning anatomy and physiology, and I'm still learning today. Like it never stops, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly learning new things. But when I started to study functional medicine, I had this is the weirdest thing, but I had to relearn physiology
Mhm.
in a different way. Body systems that I was familiar with, they don't exist in functional medicine. We look at things in a completely different and unique way. We don't put things in silos. Everything talks. Everything is connected. And so yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at things. But you're right. Everything talks. Everything is connected.
Mhm.
Um, and in fact, even the intangibles like your
Yes.
thoughts influence, and what are thoughts, right? Like what's the physics of a thought? but
Right?
but yet it's electrons, or is
Uh,
it, right? Like is
yeah.
there some intangible, is there, what is that spark? And it influences your very physical health, right?
Mhm.
So here we've got basically E equals MC squared, right? We've got light influencing matter, and that's crazy to me. That's just crazy. So anyway, now we'll get down into
Well,
inflammation.
I
Oh
think
yeah, go
you were
ahead.
going to mention the controversial
Oh, oh,
topic
oh,
again.
oh.
Yes.
Yes, yes, the elephant drug.
Yes.
Statin use. Okay. Statin use is so we know that statins can affect the brain. In fact, one of the most common side effects that people complain about is this really pervasive brain fog. All right,
Mm.
they have difficulty cognating on statins. Now, I'm not going to say this is everyone because it's not, but that's one of the most common complaints. Um, so, statin use is associated with an increase in not only certain inflammatory cytokines in the brain, but also a decrease in microbial diversity in the gut.
Mm.
And
Wow.
we know now that a decrease in microbial diversity leads to an increase in inflammation and is related to cognitive decline and dementia. So, yeah,
It
yeah,
all
it
comes
all
back together.
yes, yes. And so so the next thing I want to talk about is kind of at the bottom. It's kind of at the bottom of all these other things we've talked about. You know, we've said this causes inflammation and this causes inflammation and this causes inflammation, and all of the inflammation then leads to dementia. You lose your mind. So, let's talk about what is the mechanism, guys. This is the coolest thing we're going to talk about today. I promise you. You better be excited because this is so neat. Um, Inflammation, the way that it works, it's super complex, but it's just like figuring this stuff out. What we have learned, and I say the royal we, right? This is the whole scientific slash medical community, all of these brilliant people doing work so that people like me can just get to sit and read about it. It's incredible. But inflammation, now I want you to get the right idea here, because again, we might say, well, why on earth were we created with all these inflammatory processes in place? It's because we need them. We have to have it. Inflammation is critical for proper functioning and also for maintaining our defenses. If we didn't have the ability to inflame, we would be dead in very short order. So let's go to inflammation in the brain specifically. All right. So your immune cells, we've got an analog of white blood cells. So you're probably familiar with leukocytes. These are white blood cells that they cruise around and they find bad guys in the body and then they neutralize them. All right. They eat them or they destroy them somehow. They've got these little molecular weapons. It's all very cool. There is an analog for this, though, in the brain. There are immune cells that cruise around looking for bad guys in the brain, and these are the microglia. So they release pro inflammatory agents in response to threats that come around. All right. So the brain, the imperative of the human body is to protect the functions that are required for life, right? Like the human body will allow a fingernail to die, but it will go through vast measures to protect the brain and the central nervous system and those things that are absolutely required for life, right?
Hmm.
It will abandon everything else in the service of the brain because that's where it all begins. So it's very critical that we have a robust immune and inflammatory response able to be launched in the brain. So these microglia can release cytokines. We talked about cytokines, I believe, last time. This interleukin 1s and 6s, and then tumor necrosis factor or TNF alpha. These are inflammatory cytokines in response to threats that it perceives. Okay. Also, there are chemokines, transcription factors like nuclear factor, kappa beta. These will all cause cellular transcriptions of certain proteins, which will then go out and try to protect. But they're all part of this inflammatory cascades. There are inflammatory peptides. These are little bits of protein like bradykinin. Also, inflammation. All of these inflammatory cascades will lead to leakiness of all the membranes. And we've talked about why that's critical, right? Because we've got to be able to rush these immune components to the area of insult or injury. And so leakiness is just it's a feature. It's not a bug, it's a feature of
Huh.
inflammation, leakiness. All right. So inflammation causes leakiness of all the membranes, including the blood brain barrier. Now, if you don't know what the blood brain barrier is, we talked about this earlier. We talked about how the gut is sort of it's similar to the barrier that protects the brain from the rest of the body. So you've got this very, very thick anatomical layer that physically separates your brain from the rest of your body. All right. So there it's a three layer um really thick barrier. And so there's a dura mater, the pia mater, and the arachnoid matter, and all of those are kind of layered up together. And that's what protects your brain. And then outside of that, you've got this huge bony barrier called your skull that holds everything in together. And so
Hopefully.
hopefully, yes, yes, hopefully that remains intact. Um, and so, but inflammation causes a leakiness of that blood-brain barrier. All right. Now, this is something I found incredibly fascinating. Amyloid plaquing. Okay, amyloid plaquing. Now, when I say amyloid plaquing, I'm willing to bet that everyone thinks Alzheimer's, right? Amyloid plaques, yep, that's Alzheimer's. That's what causes it. That's what you see in an Alzheimer's brain. That's the whole kit and caboodle. But it's not. We're learning a lot about Alzheimer's now, and it's not amyloid plaquing. In fact, this amyloid beta plaque, which is like the bad guy, it's found in all older brains. Everyone's brain as you get older contains this type of plaquing, but not all brains develop Alzheimer's disease. So there's got to be something else going on, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
So the
it
plaquing in and of itself is not necessarily bad,
pathologic. That's right.
right?
That's
But
right.
it's
Yes, there's something else. There's something
yeah,
else. So what takes it over the threshold? Well, we think that it's inflammation.
that's crazy.
Inflammation appears to lead that amyloid plaque to aggregate or clump or clot together. And then that impacts the ability of the neurons to talk to each other. So here's how you can think about this. The amyloid plaquing that already exists, if you've got a chronic low level state or high level state of inflammation, you've got that leaky brain, right? So all of those inflammatory agents that we talked about, from cytokines to peptides, all of those things will come in, exposing themselves to the amyloid plaquing, making it sticky.
Hmm.
And so you can almost think about this like a clotting mechanism down below, right? From the neck down, we've got clotting mechanisms where inflammation causes stickiness of platelets and then you get clots. So here we've got amyloid stickiness where they appear to clot or aggregate together. Now it's this vicious cycle where these aggregates drive even more inflammation, and then the inflammation causes more aggregation. And so it's a positive feedback pathway. In fact, to my knowledge, there's only two positive feedback pathways in the body that are not pathologic, meaning they lead to death or disability, and that is birth and clotting. Isn't that cool? Those are the
Hmm.
only two positive feedback cascades that I think we know about that don't lead to somewhere of disease and death.
Hmm.
Anyway, so then, oh my gosh. Okay, so this is very cool. And this is the last thing that we'll talk about today. Give people a break. Um, so the last thing are these tau proteins. Now, this is really cool. So we've talked about the amyloid plaquing and its abundance in everyone's brain, but we've also got tau proteins. This is one of the most abundant proteins in the human brain. But tau production gets ramped up because of activated microglia. So remember who the microglia are. They're the immune system in the brain, right? They're the immune cells that are cruising around, like they're actively running around like white blood cells to see, just to monitor, right? Just to monitor for bad guys. Now, if they are chronically ramped up because of chronic inflammation, then tau production is ramped up. And when tau production is ramped up, that causes a chemical process called phosphorylation, meaning you're just adding a phosphate group to all these tau proteins. And when you do that, they will form tangles or aggregates. Again, we've got this idea of clumping or clotting, right? But tau protein aggregation is actually goes by the name neurofibrillary tangles, which we see in Alzheimer's. All right. So here it is. This is the direct link that you've all been waiting for. It exists in the literature. There is a direct link between inflammation or inflammatory state and Alzheimer's.
Now, something we've talked about in the past too is that not all inflammation is bad, right?
Well,
So,
that's right. But
and so
it's the
we're talking
chronicity of it though.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm. Yes.
So the goal isn't that we have zero inflammation.
Right, because we'll die.
Yeah. But this, I guess, would you consider it like a chronic inflammation,
Yeah.
or yeah,
Yeah, the
that's
chronic
where,
that's where the disease comes.
yeah.
That's where the disease comes because you can see like the body can absorb. We're resilient, right? We're created
Hmm.
to be resilient. We're
Yeah.
supposed to be here.
Right.
And so, we're supposed to be able to handle some assaults on our person,
Yep.
either by chemical or food exposure or whatever else, right? We need to be resilient to handle these things, but it's the chronic nature that really becomes a problem. And so that's where you get the amyloid clumping. That's where you
Hmm.
get the neurofibrillary tangle development from the
Yep.
tau proteins. Yeah.
Man, this is so fascinating, and
Isn't that
uh,
cool? I had a great time researching this. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for putting this all together,
Of course.
and I've heard it from several people, but just they're very thankful for your ability, our ability to simplify these complex matters in a way
Mm,
that's easily digested. And you know, you say
good,
big
good,
words
good.
all the time, so sometimes I'm just like, okay, I don't know what that means, but then you go down and you break it down for us, and so that's super helpful. But um,
Mm,
yeah, the body is so complex and so
mm.
crazy smart. And it's just
Almost
super
like it
cool to
was
just see.
designed that way.
I know.
Almost,
Not
yeah.
just an accident. It
Right.
was purposeful.
All right.
So we are going to continue this series, obviously, because we have so much more to dive into. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to get into, like Andrea said, we're not going to leave you with this doom and gloom and everything
Right.
is,
Everything's
you're,
terrible.
yeah. We are going to give you some really great ways that we can help with, of staving off dementia or some of these other diseases. So
Mm-hmm.
stay tuned for that. As always, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have ideas or suggestions, please reach out to us. We love hearing from you. As always, our email and contact information is in the show notes. And yeah, we will see you on the next episode. But yeah, I think that's it. Great way to end the episode.
Our brains are done.
Yes, I did not have my mushrooms today.
Right, Ashley? Well, I
Yeah,
told you to pulse dose on the weekend, so you're
I
just
know. So,
yeah.
nope. We're excited to continue this talk, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye. The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.